the midterm, a lot of excitement because the balance of power is hanging on by a thread for the Democrats, and it's plausible we might see a red wave. More than one-third of US voters are taking the crypto views of candidates into account in the lead up to the midterm elections next week on Tuesday, November 8th. And in addition, a recent poll indicated that 79% of American adults say US needs clear crypto regulations. Finally, Democrats and Republicans agree on something. Crypto is the future. So, hey, listen, this show has been brought to you by Roundly X. Roundly X is a great way for you to round up your purchases with Satoshis. Every time you make a purchase, that extra amount is going to be rounded up. And guess what? You're going to get Satoshis. Why don't you visit Roundly X and you can use code BitcoinPolitics to get $4. Now let's get on with the show. Okay, folks. Hey, listen, we're back. Again, thanks, Nix, for all the work that he's doing behind the scenes to make this possible. I have been incredibly excited to do this show for several reasons. As many of you know, I am the crypto curator. My name is Paul McNeil. My website is thecryptocurator.com. And my goal is to curate this news every day so that you guys have a sense of what's happening in the digital asset space. Now, it was earlier this year that a good friend of mine, Matthew Deemer, who is running for Congress in Ohio 7, he talked to me about who's really hodling Bitcoin or not. Because around that time, you started hearing more politicians start to talk about Bitcoin. It was like, okay, what's going on? Were they just jumping on the bandwagon so they can get some attention? Probably so. So he told me, he says, why don't you go dig through the financial disclosures and find out who has Bitcoin or not? And I did that. So I'm going to be able to bring to you today the people that I can verify for a fact that actually hodl Bitcoin, those who are just advocating for Bitcoin, and others who are just sort of, in the mix. We'll look at some of the political sides of this, and we're going to look at a whole slew of other things. And this show is going to be followed up by Twitter Spaces. So if you'll follow me, you're going to get that. My Twitter account is @_cryptocurator, and then you can join into the conversation. Okay, let's take a look at some of this that this election is going to give us, right? So when you begin to look at election 2022, the midterms, and this is the midterms, and this happens a lot. I was talking to a gentleman last night about this, and the reality is that normal midterms seem to swing one way or the other. The pendulum starts to swing. So if one party has control of Congress, normally we see that pendulum swing the other way and the other party gains control. It's rare to see a president who is in office hold on to Congress with his party, or if his party is not in power, that they don't eventually get power. And so normally you'll have a Republican or a Democrat who will control all of Congress and the White House at the same time. So there was an article that was posted by CoinDesk. Nicholson D, if I got his name right, I hope I didn't butcher it. He's the managing editor for Global Policy and Regulation. And this is what he had to say in his recent article, which is linked here. It says the US election is next week. Control of the Senate and the House of Representatives is up for grabs, not to mention state legislators and governorships. The crypto industry is playing a bigger role in 2022 than it did in 2020, but still not a large enough role to apparently matter overly to the results. Despite that, what's happening next week will define crypto legislation in the US for the next 2 years. That was a big statement, and I have to agree with him. What we're about to see happen in Congress, and this is part of the shocking truth that most people don't understand about Bitcoin in Congress, is that it's not what you think it is. A lot of members of Congress are tuned in. They're tapped in. Some of them are pro Bitcoin and digital assets. Others, not so much. They're more pro trying to stop the bad actors, which comes across as being anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin. And that necessarily isn't the case. As you look at our next slide, as we look at Grayscale, this is from the CEO, Michael Shaughnessy. He said, as we approach the midterm election, US voters are considering the intersection of cryptocurrency, traditional finance, and the state of the economy. So As I mentioned before, we're looking at all of Congress, right? We're looking at both the House and the Senate. And on the next slide, you'll see that we have 435 House seats that are up for grabs and 35 Senate seats that are up for grabs. So as you can tell, right now the Democrats hold most of, well, not hold, they hold 50% of the Senate, that swing vote being the vice president. And the House, for the most part, is all Republican. For the most part, not all Republicans, but a large amount of Republicans are in the House. So they have control of the House, but they don't have control of the Senate. This election might see the Senate swing toward red, and if it does, Joe Biden will be headed for the battle of a lifetime because he'll have to work with the Republican Congress, and it looks like nothing will get done. Now, as you guys know, um, speaking of nothing getting done, all of the legislation that is currently pending probably will not make it to the floor, nevertheless, make it to Joe Biden's desk before this Congress is up. So that leaves for the next Congress to come in and to pick up this work. Now, as I mentioned before, we're going to be looking at candidates that hodl Bitcoin. And believe it or not, there is a piece of legislation that is in Congress, hopefully it doesn't pass, that says that they can't hold Bitcoin. That would be a travesty if that happened. And so you need to be tuned in as a voter because if that legislation comes to the floor, you need to make sure you tell your representatives to vote no against that because members of Congress should have the ability to own Bitcoin. It is ridiculous that that's even a bill that's in Congress. Now, listen, Bitcoin is not like stocks, right? Stocks, and we know some people in Congress, they benefit greatly from getting inside information and to benefit on it. This is not inside information. This is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is global. No one individual has control of this technology or asset. So therefore, it's totally decentralized, censorship resistant technology. They should have the right and they should own Bitcoin. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to look at some of these candidates that actually own Bitcoin. As you can see, candidate Rishi Kumar, a Democrat of California, and he's in 16. So if you happen to be in California, the 16th district, look up Rishi's website. Take a look at what he's talking about. See if your values align with his. And if they do, how sweeter is it that he hodls Bitcoin? So you know he supports Bitcoin. We've got candidate Jay Chen, another Democrat, California 45. Shocking, right? Shocking that there are Democrats that are owning Bitcoin because the narrative says that Bitcoin is favored by the right. That's not true. This is incredibly bipartisan. Both parties understand the value of this technology, and guess what? They're getting in the game, and congratulations for them doing so. Our next one is Representative Michael Waltz, Republican from Florida, 6th District. If you're in that district, check him out. He hodls Bitcoin. Candidate Matthew Deemer, which is my good friend, he runs the Decrypt Daily podcast, and he also holds Bitcoin. Now, some of you might be saying, Paul, how do you know this information? It supposedly, and this is what I'm going to talk about on Twitter Spaces, or hopefully I'll talk about on Twitter Spaces. The candidates are supposed to file financial disclosures. As a matter of fact, one candidate got beat up really bad because he did not file a financial disclosure. How some of these candidates are not filing disclosures, I don't know. But some of those people I were not able to find financial disclosures for, and I don't know if they hodl Bitcoin or not because they didn't let us know. We have Representative Michael McCall, Republican of Texas, 10th District, and candidate Dr. James Rogers, Republican, Texas 30. The reason I'm smiling is because I had the opportunity to meet and hang out with Dr. Rogers at several Bitcoin meetups. He's a huge, huge Bitcoin advocate. He hodls Bitcoin as well. Now, when we look at the Senate side, we got candidate Blake Masters. Anybody in crypto know who Blake Masters is. We got candidate JD Vance. Same goes for JD. Senator Ted Cruz. Everybody knows Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz has come out several times and said that he bought Bitcoin, and Senator Cynthia Lummis, and there's nobody better than her to advocate for Bitcoin. So there you have it. You have this handful of candidates, both in the House and the Senate, that actually hodls Bitcoin. All right, now let's take a look at a few of our candidates that actually advocate for Bitcoin. I wasn't able to tell if they actually, and again, there is a difference. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I'm a Bitcoin maxi light. Listen, Bitcoin is what I'm focused on. I'm not interested in if they hold all these other cryptos. I'm interested in Bitcoin, 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 okay? But these representatives and candidates, they actually have dabbled in the space. Representative Barrymore, Republican at Alabama, 2nd District, he actually holds some cryptos, a basket of different types of cryptos. Candidate Mike Cargill. Now, I believe I heard Mike Cargill, Republican, California 35. I think I heard him on a Twitter space say that he will not buy Bitcoin as a candidate. I don't know if he'll eventually buy it once he gets into office, but he said he will not buy it. Little shocking. I think he's missing the boat. And if I'm incorrect on that and I misheard, then I would love to have him come on the Twitter spaces and clear the air. So, Mike, if you're listening, come on to Twitter spaces. Let's have a conversation about it. We got Representative Jeff Van Drew, Republican, New Jersey, 2nd District, GBTC. Now, I did not put people that own GBTC in the same category. Why? Because GBTC is you buying a share of the trust. You're not buying Bitcoin. And so it's an easy way for you to get access to Bitcoin without owning Bitcoin. And that's sort of cheating, right? Yes, he advocates Bitcoin, likes Bitcoin, but he's not. I think he should hold Bitcoin. Maybe he does. He just hasn't disclosed it. Candidate David Gulich, Republican, Pennsylvania. And if I butchered your name, I'm sorry. 5th District, he holds some other cryptos. And then Representative Pete Sessions, Republican, Texas 17. I know that he advocates for it. I don't know if he holds Bitcoin. I would hope that he does. On the Senate side, we have Senator Ron Wyden. Of course, everybody knows Ron. He come out and he's talked big time when it comes to crypto, Bitcoin in particular. And then candidate Katie Britt of Alabama, she's come out recently, and I believe it was Dennis Porter that welcomed her to Bitcoin. And then we have Senator Pat Toomey, Pennsylvania, but he's retiring, so technically he's going to be out of there, but good that he does. Hey, I want to take this moment to also thank another one of my sponsors. It's Forward. Listen, folks, I am all about having good health, and I decided to go with this company called Forward. Why? It's a whole new type of doctor's office. They really do work with you. As a matter of fact, today I had a follow-up meeting, a quarterly meeting with my physician where we reviewed my blood lab works. I'm African American, we sometimes have high cholesterol, right? A lot of us die from congestive heart failure. My mother passed away from it. So I'm very sensitive to that. And I'm happy to report that my levels went down. They dropped drastically. So the advice that I've gotten from the doctors at Forward, they have helped me reduce my cholesterol numbers. That is significant. And it was about a 15% reduction in the number, putting me in a really good spot. So listen, if you haven't considered this, or if you're not being proactive with your health, I really beg you guys to do so. Folks in crypto, we need you around, and we need you around for a long time. And so the best way to do that is by being preventative. Preventative care is better than corrective care, right? I'm sure you've heard that before. And I want you to. So if you click this link, and you'll have the copy of this briefing. If you click that link, there's a referral code in there. You'll get 3 months, no cost access to Forward system. They'll do the blood work. They'll go over your numbers. The doctors will meet with you. They'll counsel you. They have counseling if you need it. There's a ton of value to the system. And I just think that it would be a sad miss if I didn't encourage you guys to go check out Forward. Okay, let's get on back to the show. Now, I want to look at the bipartisan legislation. I didn't talk about all the legislation, and there's a reason why, and I'll get to the numbers here in a minute. Actually, let me pull that up now. Let me give you guys some very interesting tips before I go on any further. There's some interesting facts, and again, maybe the shocking truth of Bitcoin in Congress. We've got 105 members of Congress that have sponsored or co-sponsored legislation that applies to crypto assets and blockchain technology. Guys, that's significant, right? That's 105 members. Now, there's 535 members, but to have 105 of them tuned in, tapped in, and you know those 105 are probably talking to the rest of their colleagues. Guys, as Pompey say, the virus is spreading, right? It's spreading throughout Congress. So Congress is very tuned in. 40 states are represented, and the following states have no bills pending in Congress. Now, unfortunately, Alaska, Arkansas, Delaware, Hawaii, Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, Oregon, West Virginia, and Utah, none of their representatives have sponsored or co-sponsored any bills. And I think that's an unfortunate miss. I think those states need to get on board and either have some of those representatives co-sponsor some of these bills or sponsor some bills. 35 Democratic representatives, 31 Republican representatives, 23 Republican senators, and 17 Democratic senators. Folks, bipartisan. across the board, right? So this is not about all of a sudden, this is just one side or this is the other side. No, this is both sides. And it is great to see that we're getting represented from both sides of the aisle. Bills sponsored, not seeking reelection. We have some of those folks who are sponsoring bills, but they're not seeking reelection. So what's going to happen to those bills? Don't know right now. And hopefully on the Twitter space, Cap Hill Crypto, George Leonardo will be able to explain what will happen with these bills. But there are 5 houses, there's 5 bills in the House, 1 bill in the Senate that their bill sponsors aren't seeking reelection. And then when it comes to the co-sponsors, we've got 4 in the House, 2 in the Senate. 1 in the House that was co-sponsoring the bill passed away. So we've got 34 pieces of legislation focused on crypto assets, 8 are focused on blockchain, and 9 are focused on CBDCs and eCash. These are some really, really interesting numbers about what's going on in Congress. This is why, as a citizen, you need to be tuned in, because they should be doing what we want them to do as our representatives. I believe it was Matthew Deemer who put out a campaign ad, of course, and he was saying, I'm not running to be your leader. I'm running to be your representative. And there is a responsibility your representative have to poll the people that he represents, make sure he's speaking on their behalf. We live in a democracy, folks. If you let your voice be heard, then those representatives have a duty to represent that view. Now, again, it's majority win. So in most cases, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but we live in a democratic society. The majority wins. So if the majority wants a representative to do something, that representative should carry that out within reason. All right. And one last piece, one fun fact is $80 million poured into campaigns from crypto PACs. All right, let's get back to that bipartisan legislation. Now, this bipartisan legislation, I picked it just to highlight to give you a flavor of what some of this legislation looks like. HR 6006, this is a House bill that was sponsored by Patrick McHenry. He's a Republican, North Carolina. And it has 19 co-sponsors, the most of any other bill. This bill was in direct response to the infrastructure bill being passed by Joe Biden earlier this year that had a horrible language about what classified a broker. And this isn't the only one. There are several other bills that are attacking that infrastructure bill and that definition, because it is imperative that they get that right, because we don't want to put undue pressure and undue reporting requirements on someone that's not. 2 other bills in the Senate, Senate Bill 4356. This is a bipartisan bill from Congresswoman Lamas Gillibrand. This is a co-sponsored bill by Democrat and Republican, and it's a Responsible Financial Innovation Act sponsored by, of course, Senator Lamas. She's from Wyoming, and it has one co-sponsor, Gillibrand. And it is considered to be the most comprehensive bill as it applies to the entire crypto industry as a whole. And then we have one more in the Senate, 4760. It's a bipartisan bill. Again, these are bipartisan bills. Digital Commodities Consumer Protection Act, the DCCPA. You probably heard a lot about this, and is sponsored by Senator Debbie Stabenow, Democrat in Michigan, and it has 3 co-sponsors. This bill expands the definition of commodity in the Commodities Exchange Act to include digital commodities and require digital commodity platforms to register with the CFTC. This is the part that's putting the CFTC in charge of commodities, things like Bitcoin. Ron Hammond's Twitter thread on Bankless podcast provides us unique insight. And I want to jump over to that, and I want to talk about that a little bit. You can leave that screen where it is because I didn't put this in the slide presentation. But this is what Ron Hammond had to say. He said, "This week in Congress and crypto, it's not too often that a podcast is the talk of the town in DC, but the Bankless HQ debate between Sam Bankman-Fried, and a lot of you know he has a lot to say about regulation, and Eric Voorhees, who ran a platform called Shapeshift, and he got so much pressure from the SEC, he pushed that platform decentralized, pulled himself out of it." Now, he says, as a former Hill staffer who worked on crypto legislation and current lobbyist, here are some thoughts. And so one of the things that he said is that there are a number of reasons why the crypto policy realm is unique on Capitol Hill. But one element that I see work time and time again is pop culture and fast-paced nature of it. The Bankless HQ team did a great job in marketing this to be a can't-miss event, and few did. After chatting with a few staffers and DC policy folks over the weekend, the general consensus was that at a high level, both did a great job representing the two camps in crypto on the DCCPA and crypto regulation in general. Many found their views in the middle of the two. Some things that resonated. Eric Voorhees said it well. If you aren't at the table, you're on the menu. That is largely true. And the industry has recognized that since the infrastructure bill, the number of resources has tripled in a year. Crypto lobbying is a stronger force. Sam Bankman-Fried made a good point on lobbying efforts in the past, like the BIT license. Most times, lawmakers will tell staff, I want a bill that does XYZ, and the staff engages with the industry and others to craft it. Policy folks work to improve the bill, but rarely do they write it. Many in the industry tend to go straight to the lawmaker for tweaks to a bill, but most of the time the members doesn't even grasp everything. He or she is extremely busy and it's a complex topic. Usually it's just one or two staffers in their 20s or 30s who hold the pen. Folks, you need to understand this. This is some good information from Ron Hammond. And Ron, once again, thank you. Hopefully you'll be making our Twitter spaces. I don't know if you will. He goes on and says some industry folks refuse to engage on any sort of crypto legislation that is potentially detrimental because it is easier to fight something than to work to improve it. This is usually a bad tactic because the same issue areas is so tough and many times there are unintended issues. Therefore, when engaging with staff, being respectful is important. And I can't hammer that home enough. Dennis Porter makes this case as well. You've got to be respectful when you're talking to the staff and to the representatives. Calling them names and screaming and yelling at them is not going to get anything done. He goes on and says SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, of course, harped this well because even if the members loses, retire, staff stick around and won't forget when an individual or a company was difficult to work with or constantly pestering them for edits and text. It may sound weird, but the Hill does have its own language, similar to how crypto Twitter has its own language and culture. It says why many advocacy efforts from CEOs in the past failed was because the industry tried to convey complicated finance tech issues to political people. He goes on and says education leads to good policy. Staffers have a lot of other issues in financial services alone to deal with. Fiscal policy, budget, bank regulations, payments, regulatory oversight. To bring everyone up to speed a week before a vote is tough, so educate early and often. Finally, there are a lot of conversations in DC regarding extremes. Staffers hear all the time. If this bill is signed into law, X disastrous thing will happen. These arguments are always worst case scenarios, and after a while, they fall flat. Saying this will kill DeFi won't help. When staffers hear the kill DeFi talking point, they naturally go to what's DeFi? I know that may sound trivial, but for a committee that largely deals with rural development, biotech, forestry, DeFi isn't a common of a topic. Different for banking committee though. And lastly, he says, it is worth commenting, Bankless HQ, Ryan S. Adams, Trust Estate in DC this weekend. But in the words of an overheard staffer, not sure what y'all said, but sounds cool. Now I want to work in crypto. Okay, I know that was a lot to read, but here's the thing. I wanted you guys to have exposure to what Ron said because I think it was incredibly valuable. So many good nuggets in there. That's why I would love to have him on my Twitter spaces. I hope he joins, but he probably won't. Okay, let's take a look at our next slide. That was the bipartisan. Now, don't get me wrong, there is some partisanship when it comes to Congress, right? Senate Bill 3867 is the Digital Asset Sanction Compliance Enhancement Act of 2022, sponsored by none other than our favorite friend, Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts. And it's co-sponsored by 10 other Democrats. This is a lot of people involved on this one. It authorizes the president to sanction crypto firms that are doing business with sanctioned Russian entities. And I'm sure you can see why this may not be popular across the aisle. These bills like this are tricky because the aim and the goal is to do something, but the problem with it is how is it going to be done? And when you start talking about sanctioning someone or something in the decentralized world, in the world that it's just trouble, right? And so the Democrats don't get a lot of praise from the things they put forth in a partisan fashion like this. And there's a reason that there's probably no Republican co-sponsors. Okay. And if we look in the House, HR 1030, once again, Democratic type legislation, Automatic Boost to Communities Act, sponsored by Representative Rashida Tlaib, Democrat, Michigan, and co-sponsored by 10 other Democrats, it directs the Treasury Secretary to establish a program to provide monthly payments to U.S. consumers during the COVID pandemic to recover from the emergency. Again, I'm sure you can see why no Republicans probably would co-sponsor legislation like this. So, as we look at our next slide, the general legislation so in what I'm about to show you now is in big thanks to Cap Hill Crypto. If you haven't had a chance to check out caphillcrypto.com, please do. George Leonardo, I keep messing his name up, he's gonna kill me. George Leonardo has done a phenomenal job at curating all the legislation that's in Congress. That's how I know all of this stuff. It's from his legislative tracker. So if you go check out caphillcrypto.com, check out his legislative tracker, you'll see what I see. And he lays it out there. This is a great tool for people that are in Congress, their staffers. It's great for us as citizens, so we know what they're talking about out there. Bravo, 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 George. Thank you so much. And George said that he's going to be on the first part of the Twitter Spaces. So if you want to hear from George directly, please join the Twitter Space. Now, he's broken it down to 3 different categories: general, blockchain legislation, and then CBDCs and eCash. So with the general, here's some of what these bills are dealing with. It's trying to prevent illicit use and fraud, trying to remove barriers to innovation, classification and use, advisory, regulatory regulation for crypto assets, stable coins, exchanges, reporting requirements, taxation, global use of crypto. You guys can read this stuff. It's massive what they're trying to achieve. And if you can think about the work and the effort it takes for all of those members in Congress to get up to speed on this technology, and then have someone, as we just learned from Ron Hammer, they don't write it, the staffers and they have lobbyists that write all this legislation up, but they have to review it, and they have people trying to this is a lot of work. This is not simple stuff. And I know in crypto, a lot of times we like to take pot shots where we can, right? We can't stand the government. They suck. They don't do any work. They're horrible. They're just evil people. They want to kill us. It's a lot of work. It's a really lot of work. And listen, I'm glad it's not my job. And Matthew and Dr. Rogers, I salute both of you for jumping in the mud pits and taking this on. So as we look at our next slide, blockchain legislation, the use of blockchain technology, blockchain center of excellence, right? The definitions that involve a blockchain technology, because they have to get the speed on this stuff. Consumer protection, financial reporting exclusions, national strategy, talking about having a national blockchain strategy, higher education. I remember in the early days, someone said, and this was way before we even got to where we are, they were saying one day the nation's going to have a strategy for blockchain, and everyone just erupts in laughter, right? It's like, what? It's coming true, right? Coming true. As we look at our next slide, CBDC and eCash legislation, use for stimulus purposes programs, that's the part where we have issues. I even have an issue. I tell most people, listen, I'm a bipartisan type person. Some issues on the right, some issues on the left. When it comes to finances, I'm more fiscally conservative. So the stimulus programs, any program from the government, I'm a little wishy on, because government can't run programs well. They've proven that. I'm not saying that just because I'm trying to take a pot shot at the government. They've proven they're not really good at running programs. So I think some of this stuff could be handled outside of government. Creation of a CBDC. Our producer Nick and me, we go round and round in this issue about CBDCs, and I know Nick is probably just gritting his teeth. But the creation of a CBDC. Now, we have other members of Congress that are writing legislation to prohibit the creation of a CBDC. The use by the federal there's nothing federal or reserve about them, right? And then limiting big tech. I probably should not talk about that too much, because I'll wind up getting shut down. But yeah, so folks, again, I wanted to bring this show to you. I wanted to show you this information so you can have it. And then, like I said, when I get on my Twitter Spaces in about another 30 minutes, we're going to hop on Twitter Spaces, and hopefully I can have a lot of you in there to tell me what you think about the stuff that you just saw, right? It is, to me, it's shocking, because if you ask the average citizen walking down the street, does Congress know anything about digital assets? And they'll probably laugh. First of all, most of them probably say, what's a digital asset, or what's a crypto asset, right? I was at a gathering last night, and there was a financial advisor there, and she was like, I don't even mention, don't talk about it. Hand to the speak, talk to the hand, right?" And she said, "Listen, I'm not going to get in trouble with this stuff." She's like, "I don't understand it well enough, and I'm not going to get my clients in it because no, we're just not doing that." And this is why people like Tyrone Ross is so key to what we're doing. Why? Because he is going to make it possible for people in his community, the registered investment advisor community, to get on board and understand this technology. And it's going to be exciting to see when a lot of them are on board. We just got news today that Fidelity is opening up ramps for people to be buying and selling digital assets, right? Crypto assets. This is exciting stuff. And I think we're going to see more and more of this happen the more members of Congress get educated. Now, what happens when the election is over next week on the 8th? And a lot of the pro Bitcoin candidates win. That's going to be amazing, right? That adds even more pro Bitcoin, hopefully, people in Congress. Soon, every representative is going to understand Bitcoin and they're going to understand blockchain technology. I believe it was Altcoin Daily that tweeted that every representative should own Bitcoin. And I said, you know what? I agree with you. They should. Most of them don't, for varying reasons. But my hope is that one day we'll see them all on Bitcoin and we'll be moving toward the Bitcoin standard as a nation, not just as individuals, right? How great will it be when we have a Bitcoin president? And I think that we possibly could have one if Mayor Francis Suarez would run for office. It would be great to have him on Twitter Spaces too. So, Mayor, if you're listening, please come join me. I'd love to have you on the show. But again, this is why this space is so exciting. Here's the thing: I'm not going to stop tracking this information after the election. I will continue to monitor Congress and what's going on in government when it applies to digital assets, specifically Bitcoin, because I believe that the more we move that direction, it's going to tell us a lot about how we will do as it applies to this. I was also talking to somebody last night, and we were saying, I think Bitcoin was created by the government, whatever. I was like, hey, guess what? If it was created by the government, they're not going to shut it down. Not at this point. And plus, we know they can't, right? We already understand this is a decentralized, censorship-resistant technology. And if you haven't read the white paper, you should. Bitcoin just turned 14 years old on October 31st. That was Bitcoin's white paper anniversary. Bitcoin itself didn't come into existence until the following year. But the beauty is that if you get a chance to read the white paper, you'll understand this even more. And you might be able to have some conversations with your representative. Okay, so here's a few things I'll do before we stop. As a result of you watching this and getting this information, my hope is that you will either tweet, email, or call if you don't know who that person is, please get in contact with me. I'll make sure you do. There are websites out there. All you have to do is Google it. I'm sure you can do that. But please do that. Tweet, email, call, either choice, and let them know you want them to support Bitcoin. All the other stuff, don't really care about right now. Bitcoin. Tell them you want them to support Bitcoin. It's important. Very, very important that you do that. In addition, I want you to follow me on Twitter if you're not already, @_cryptocurator. I talk to everybody. I'm very friendly. I'm not adversarial. Just ask my producer Nick. He'll tell you. Producer Nick, me and him, we go at it. We can have our moments. We have our moments. There's different topics that we have our moments, but at the end of the day, we get to see eye to eye on things, and that's the way it is. We don't want everyone to agree with us on everything we say. We need people to challenge us, right? So we have those good relationships, though. There's a great saying that says, "Iron sharpens iron as one friend sharpens another." Right? So let's be sharp together. Don't just listen to what I say and be like, "Oh yeah, Paul, you're great." No, come back and be like, "Paul, that was screwed up. That was messed up. Here's what the truth is." That's the way we work in this country. There's no shame in going back and telling somebody in a reasonable way that you don't agree with them. And guess what? Sometimes we're not going to agree. It's okay to disagree agreeably, right? That's just the way it is. There's a habit that says go for win-win. We both want to win, or no deal. No deal is an option. You can just say, hey, no deal. It's okay. And I do that many times on Twitter. I just tell people, okay. So if you see me ever say, okay, you know that either you won and I agree with you, or no, actually, if I agree with you, I will tell you. If I agree with you, but if I say okay, it means that I see that there's an impasse and we're not going to see eye to eye. So I just say okay. And the reason is that I am agreeing to disagree agreeably with you. So, hey, folks, listen, thank you so much for listening to this. This show is produced by Bitcoin Live DB. They are based in the Netherlands. Amazing team. Nick and Jan brothers have done so much for us, and this is why I'm able to do this. Didn't want to do it at first, but Nick convinced me to do it. I'm so happy he did. Follow them on Twitter as well, Bitcoin Live DB. And yeah, let's have fun for this election. Last thing. On November the 10th, 2 days after the election, I am going to review the election results with Cap Hill Crypto. That is George Leonardo. Me and him, we're going to get on this show, Bitcoin Politics, and we're going to unpack what happened during the election. So hopefully you'll join us back here next Thursday, and the timing will be 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, not 2, because of the time change, and the U.S. is behind the Netherlands, and that's why. So 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, be here, be there, a B square. Thanks, guys.